Good afternoon, Mr. Moodaley.
Good afternoon.
Yes. We'll have to cut to the chase. Advocate Nile is going to do what she has to do, and thereafter you'll be taken through the paces by Mr. Abraham. Advocate Nile.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, Mr. Moodaley.
Good afternoon.
Will you be taking an oath or will you affirm?
I'll do the oath.
No problem. Mr. Rajan Moodaley, do you swear that the evidence you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rajan Moodaley, you've now been sworn in as a participant in the SJN hearings.
Mr. Abraham.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moodaley.
Good day, sir.
Thank you for making time to speak with us. I just want to alert you up front that we have allocated approximately an hour and a half for you to tell your story and to make your presentation before the Ombudsman. So you're going to have to pace yourself, taking that into consideration. And so you're going to tell us your story. And so we're going to give you a free hand for you to structure your presentation how you will. What you will have maybe are just intermittent interjections from us, just asking questions or clarifications as we go along. Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Thank you. So I'd like you to start with just introducing yourself, who you are, what your pedigree is in the game, both as a player and an administrator. And you also express very strong views about transformation. It would be very useful if you could tell us why, what entitles you to speak and to express those strong views on transformation. In other words, what has been your involvement even in matters transformation as well. So if you could cover those in your introduction, it would be very helpful. Over to you, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Let me start by saying I was born on the 8th of December 1958 in Port Elizabeth. You all know it's now called Gqeberha. And let me thank you as the Ombudsman and the Office of the Ombudsman and Cricket South Africa for this opportunity to do this presentation. I've been a sports administrator at club level since 1977. Now let me explain why at such an early age. We were compelled as young people to assume leadership roles in our clubs as a result of a breakaway by a number of clubs and individuals in 1976 to join the ranks of the then South African Cricket Union. And those of us, or those who refused to do so, continued to play cricket under the banner of the South African Cricket Board, or SACB as we called it, which was then affiliated to the South African Council of Sport, that is SECOS, and to the South African Non-Racial Olympic Committee, SANROC, which was based in London, under the leadership of Sam Ramsden. I became a provincial administrator in 1981, and I was also privileged to have been part of the unification process in cricket, which followed in 1991 onwards. My participation in this process is motivated by a number of things. Firstly, I have a lifelong passion for the game. I've been a player at club level since 1972, and I continue playing. As of today, I still play league cricket. I'm currently the president of my club, that is Legends Cricket Club. Secondly, I have a deep belief in the principles of non-racialism and in the principles that were expounded by SECOS. Thirdly, I have a desire to see that everyone has equal opportunities in all aspects of life, not only in cricket, by the way. Number 4, I have a deep belief in sustainable development. And with that, I want to say, I don't believe in doing haphazard, ad hoc, patch-up jobs just to please people on the spur of the moment. You asked for a bit of a background, but before I get there, let me just say that the statement or my participation in this process today is underpinned and supported by 3 documents that I've submitted to your office, and which I will refer to and speak to during my presentation. The first one I've titled Transformation in South African Cricket. The second one I've titled Sport as a Social Movement. And the third one is a study I've done, an analysis I've done of age group or township representation in age group teams in Eastern Province cricket from 2009 to 2019. Bearing in mind there was no cricket played last year because of COVID. Is there anything else that you want me to mention, or does that satisfy you?
No, I think that's a good introduction. So you will speak to each of those documents and intertwine them into your presentation, so that you can speak comprehensively to them. Yes, and I think that if you could just touch on the issue of transformation, what captured your heart to be involved in matters transformation, and since when?
You see, when cricket was unified, okay?
Yes, sir.
And everybody was keen for South Africa to be readmitted to international sport, not just cricket. And I think it was mentioned previously during the first week by one of the participants that there were political motives, and not wrongfully, but rightfully so, to get the country unified, to make the process of political transition easy. I think everybody must accept and admit that South Africa is a sports-mad country. So the sooner we could get people participating internationally, it would make that process a bit easier. So in November of 1991 already, cricket sent a team to India to play, I think it was 3 one-day international games. In 1992, we participated in the Olympic Games in Barcelona in Spain. And in 1992, we then participated in the World Cup. And the same year, we had international rugby being played. Now, all of that happened prior to 1994. And as sports administrators, we conceded to that because we felt it was necessary for the smooth transition to democracy in the country, and any processes that could assist with that was most welcome. But of course, that hype of 91 and participation in the World Cup soon died down. And then the realization hit many people to say, but hang on, there isn't real equitable representation at either provincial level or international level within cricket, and I'm specifically talking about cricket. And that opened up the debate about how are we going to get, representation in cricket, because there was nobody. I think a previous speaker mentioned that he was the only person of color in the 1992 World Cup team. And that eventually led to the establishment in 1998 of the Transformation Monitoring Committee at national level and provincial monitoring committees at all the, what was then called United Cricket Board of South Africa affiliates. And I was fortunate, if I can say that, to have been elected by my peers at club level as the chairperson of the Provincial Monitoring Committee in the Eastern Province. Okay? And even though the aim of that initiative was to monitor the implementation of transformation at all levels, in other words, national and provincial, it was fraught with many obstacles from the beginning. Those of us that were involved in that process and in those various committees were not given any recognition for the role that was expected of us. And at most times we were seen as outsiders who were trying to interfere in the day-to-day affairs of cricket. And we were questioned as to why there was a need for us to monitor those in office at the time, even though the understanding was this thing had been agreed upon. Now, I just want to stop there. Even this process that we are engaging with at the moment has been agreed upon at the Cricket South Africa board level. Yet at the very first instance, when a legal letter was received, the interim board immediately then put a stop to this thing, even though it was for a temporary period. So that is the same thing that happened. You see, Mr. Chairman, when these processes are controlled by other people, they can initiate them and they can stop them whenever they feel like. And that is exactly what happened then. So it came as no surprise to us when that initiative was scrapped by the United Cricket Board of South Africa before the 2023 World Cup. Now that was in 2001, 2002, somewhere there. It is now 2021. So almost 20 years have passed since then, and today we're talking about the same issues. You know, and many things have happened in the meantime. And my view, I'm not going to go back into those things. I think many people that have been here before have done that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I fully support their views that they've expressed. My point of view is we need to adopt a more holistic view of this topic of transformation. Because up until now, most people have looked at transformation and they've only looked at it from a black and white perspective. Okay? Now, I'm going to be brutally frank with you. I don't regard people as either black or white. The paper in front of you is white. And there's not a human being on earth that looks like that. Advocate Nele may look like that at times when she puts some funny mixture on her face. Give the people in the house a fright because she will look like a spook. But that's nobody is white. The jacket you are wearing is black. No person is that. You know, and my honest opinion is we must move away from labeling people as black and white. For the same reason, I'm not a big fan of this word called quotas, because they tend to place limitations on people's representation. Because most people feel once you've reached the quota, then why must you give people more opportunities? So that is my point of view. We need to adopt a holistic view of transformation. And when I come to the topic of transformation, if you don't mind me using an analogy, I'm sure many people in the room there with you and many people outside will remember from their school biology days when you were taught about the life cycle of a butterfly. It goes through 4 stages: the egg, the larva, the pupa, the adult. But when that adult butterfly develops, it in no way resembles any of the other 3 stages. And we need to adopt that kind of approach to transformation. Whatever we want to achieve mustn't be a hatchet job of what we currently have. We need to clearly define what is it that we want to transform or change, and we must do so consciously and without fear of favor or care about what people may say or how people may react. Because if you have a goal in mind, that is the goal you must strive towards. So, and most people only view transformation in that very narrow sense about how many black faces are there in a previously all-white team? And honestly, I think we need to really move away from that. So I want to speak to that first document, if you don't mind, transformation in South African cricket. I've already started there, and take you through a few aspects of that. And I don't mind if you interrupt and ask questions of clarity. I am fine with that as well. So, during June of last year, the Minister of Sport was presented with a report by a group of persons known as the Eminent Persons Group. And in that report, it highlighted the fact that less than 10% of the 25,000 schools that we have participate in sport. Now, that immediately should pose a big question, Mr. Chairman. If you look at any document that emanates from cricket, at the bottom of the letterhead or bottom of the page, it says Cricket South Africa is the controlling or governing body for all cricket, amateur and professional. Now that should make us wonder, why is it that less than 10% of all schools participate in sport? And I remember, Mr. Chairman, last Thursday you mentioned this during the session with somebody, that perhaps it's time that we need to start interrogating or something to do with the Department of Basic Education. And I think it was mentioned this morning as well by my friend who spoke here. So that is the first issue, okay? Now, that is the report that was presented to the minister. Yet following that, I saw nothing coming from the Department of Sport or from the minister's office to ask cricket, listen, what are you going to do about the state of affairs? You're coming here and you're telling us less than 10% of schools participate in sport, but what are you going to do about it? Right? Where are we going to get the next generation of cricketers from? If we look at and again, these are horrible terms, but let's use them. The black African cricket in your Protea setup at the moment. Which schools do they come from? And I'm not blaming these kids. I take my hat off to them because they've achieved what is due to them. But where do they come from? St. Stithians, Hilton College, Sex, Cape Town, Marist Brothers, Joburg. That is where they come from, Mr. Chairman. And you need to ask yourself, when are we going to get people coming from Langa, Guguletu, Soweto, Alexandria, Brighton, Zwidi, KwaZulu, Amlazi, KwaMashu, all these places? Because truth be told, and even other areas, other suburbs, townships, nobody is worried about the fact that these kids are not engaged in sport. In fact, a report was also released last year which says that of all the so-called black African players which has represented South Africa up to now in cricket, Mfuneko Ngam is the only one from a traditional township and a traditional township school. Okay. Then I want to go further and mention that I conducted a study on representation of township schools in age group teams in Eastern Province cricket from 2009 to 2019. You have that document in the pack there. I'm not going to go through it, it's 22 pages long. But at the end of it, for that entire period, the average representation of township schools in all those age group teams is also less than 10%. In fact, it is 9.53%. So while we're meeting the quotas that are required, because it says 50% of those teams must be players of color. Question is, where are they coming from? They're coming from former Model C schools, and they're coming from more affluent or elite schools, all right? But they're not coming from the township schools. Okay.
Mr. Moodaley, please speak
Yes,
to
sir.
the issue. You're saying that a great majority of those, in fact, nearly all of them, come from former Model C schools and even privileged white schools. But why
Yes,
is
sir.
it that none of them are coming from black? Who's to blame? What is not happening that ought to be happening? Why is it
Okay.
that black township schools are not producing them?
You see, if you look at the report of the eminent persons group, where they said less than 10% of the schools are actually playing sport,
Yes.
right? Now, this point has been made by people previous to me in this platform, that school sport in traditional township areas has been on the decline for many years. You understand?
Yes.
And I'm not saying, and people in cricket will jump to their defense and argue and say, but hang on, it's not cricket's problem. And I'm not saying it is solely cricket's problem. But if you say you are the custodian of a sport, then I must hold you accountable
Yes.
for the fact that you are not promoting that sport at all levels where you should be promoting it, right? And I'm going to use another analogy before I explain further. I'm sure many of you have watched a Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee movie. Okay? Now you'll always find that those people will always emerge. Yes, it's a movie, but they'll emerge victorious. Now, why do they emerge victorious? Because even if they're surrounded by 12 hooligans, the hooligans attack them one at a time. They don't attack them all at the same time. And this is what we're doing in sport and in general. You see, there is a lack of integration. We don't tend to work together to pool our resources, and nobody wants to take the responsibility. Now, my view here, Mr. Chairman, is especially with this problem in cricket, right? I hold cricket accountable. Cricket should have been the catalyst to convene discussions with your Department of Sport, your Department of Basic Education, your Department of Social Development, your local government authorities, and any other agency or government department that must play a role, right? Even with your police services and those things, and come up with a solution. But not just sit back and say, well, we can't help it because the kids are not playing sport. Because then we're not going to achieve what we say we want to achieve, right? If you read through Cricket South Africa's so-called transformation plan, it's a very fancy document, right? Nice colored, green and yellow and white and what have you. And they talk of a pipeline there. But we all know, if I want to get water out of the ground and I sink a ball, I must make sure that that pipe is going to get to the source of the water. If I don't sink that pipe deep enough into the source, I can stand there until I'm blue in the face, I will not get water. So when we talk of pipeline development, and that's their words, they must make certain that that pipeline is reaching the source. And unfortunately, with schools not playing cricket, we're not getting to the source. Okay? I will come just now to what the effects are of kids not playing cricket in school. That's another big issue. Okay. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Now, by the same token, you'll find that there's been a decline in club cricket. over the years. Okay? And to such an extent that besides not having cricketers coming from schools, we're also not putting enough effort into club cricket. All the focus is at the highest level. See, to such an extent, I can tell you now, of the players that have been contracted by Eastern Province for the coming season to participate in the new provincial structure, not a single person originates from this part of the world. Now, what does that tell us? That despite everything that's going on around us, we are not producing talent that is worthy of being offered a contract. See, and that should be another cause for concern. Why are our systems not producing talent good enough to be offered a contract? So all those players are being contracted from outside of the area. So what are we saying about our systems, be it school, be it club, whatever league structure we have, that it's not good enough to produce the quality of cricketer that we can contract to keep in the province? Okay. I just want to highlight, and I will come to each one separately, but before it slips my mind, some of the other issues that we need to take note of that are relevant in cricket today. Ladies cricket, we don't have, and I speak from a perspective now here where I am in Eastern Province. We don't have properly organized ladies cricket. There are only a handful, maybe 3, maximum 4 clubs that participate in cricket where ladies can play cricket. And yet we want to go out then and select representative teams and select a national team, when that is one of the things that we should be focusing on. Okay? I think people have spoken at length about facilities, and if time will allow, and if you will allow me to share my screen with you, I want to put up 1 or 2 pictures near the end to show you what the state of some of the facilities are that our clubs have to endure. Okay. Another point that I want to mention, disputes that are not resolved or left unresolved. We have an issue of non-adherence to the Memorandum of Incorporation or non-compliance with it. Okay. Non-existent or poor monitoring and evaluation, incorrect reporting, appointments that are made without following due process, and favoritism. And if you want, I can touch on those now, or we can come back to them. You need to guide me.
Yeah, well, you may just as well deal with them now.
Okay. I'm going to start with the one that is most probably going to be most controversial, Mr. Chairman. And it links with this topic of transformation. You see, as I said earlier, before you engage in the process of transformation, there must be something that stimulates you to say, wow, what is the need for us? Why do we need to make change? You don't make change for the sake of making change. There must be something that there must be a stimulus, something, and must give impetus to the process of transformation. Now, and again, I'm not making or casting any aspersions or making allegations against any particular person, but I'm going to use the process of the appointment of a director of cricket as the example of what I'm talking about here. During the 2019 World Cup, during which South Africa fared quite badly. I mean, I remember us losing the play of the one round-robin game to Bangladesh and whatever. But constantly during that tournament and emanating from the commentary boxes was this reference to the fact that South Africa must follow the example of England. Meaning that because England had appointed their former captain, Andrew Strauss, in the position of director of cricket, we should go the same way. Because that will be a solution to a lot of our problems, right? That was the end. That was in 2019 during the World Cup tournament that was held in England. When things started going wrong in Cricket South Africa in December of 2019, the suspension of the then CEO, and calls were made for the entire board to resign. This whole thing again started coming to the fore. Now we knew they capitulated and they created the position of director of cricket, and it was filled. Okay. Now, my point is, when you do something like that, it needed to be thoroughly analyzed. It needed to be a result of an in-depth planning analysis process during which you revisit your vision and your mission, and you go through the whole process of SWOT analysis, internal reviews, external reviews, all of those things, Mr. Chairman. And you need to then revisit every job description to determine whether it's necessary and whether it's necessary to redesign your structure that we refer to as organizational design. And only then would you then develop this new position and devise the mechanisms that are required, and then come up with a job profile in which you identify what are the skills, what is the knowledge, what are the competencies, and what are the attributes that you require of a person who's going to fill such a position. And none of that took place, you see? Because haphazard done to satisfy whoever needed to be satisfied. And I'm going to be honest, and I think the board thought they're going to save their souls by doing this and satisfying those that were calling for it. And it didn't quite work out for them, because not long after that, they also were forced to step down. And I think we heard here during the first, I think it was on the first day of testimony, where someone said that even that contract was not was irregularly done, but that's not for me to discuss. So I'm just saying, when I make the example of appointment that is done without following due process, we don't know why things are done and proper processes are not followed. When I talk of monitoring and evaluation, I couldn't help, Mr. Chairman, overhearing you ask a question the other day for clarity about what is a hub and what is an RPC. Now, we've spent, or cricket has spent, millions of rands on development programs and all of these things over the years. And throughout the country now we have these regional performance centers and all of those things. But when we look at what the outputs are from those things, then we've got very little to show. Now, surely as an investment in such programs, you must want to see some kind of return on your investment, you know? And when I give you the example to say, we have 4 of those hubs in the province, and yet we can't produce one contracted player, and then it's a serious problem, because nobody is monitoring what goes on in those programs, what is happening, but we just keep paying coaches and doing this and doing that just to satisfy whoever to say what we're doing it. But we don't know if we'll be getting a result out of that. Then, when I talk of disputes not resolved, and I'm going to make an example from my club, we had a dispute with EP Cricket started in September last year. And it was everything was done according to the prescriptions of the MOI to lodge a dispute and challenge it and whatever it is. It wasn't resolved. We then followed the next step required and we referred the matter to Cricket South Africa in October. You'll be surprised if I tell you that up till today that matter is still not resolved. Now, surely you cannot run an organization successfully if you don't pay attention to these things, right? And we are precluded. We can't run to courts. We don't have the means to run to the courts and engage legal representation to represent us. We've got to follow the prescriptions that are laid down to say this is the dispute resolution mechanism. And when you do it, then you get nowhere. And maybe the hope is that if you keep quiet long enough, it will just fizzle away and disappear. You see? Okay. When I talk of favoritism, I will just give you one example. And there are many. People have spoken about these things many times. I will just give you one example that maybe somebody else may not want to mention. Right? And as an example, a particular player finished his first-class playing career a couple of years ago and then wanted to follow a career in some other form in cricket. And within a very short space of time, that player was rushed through the ranks of umpiring to eventually be serving on the top panel that officiates in provincial cricket or franchise cricket, as we used to call it. Now that's all well and good, but in the process of fast-tracking that one person, many other who who'd been in the system waiting for opportunities were ignored. Okay? And that is, I'm not making any racial accusation. I'm calling it favoritism because I'm not going to go down that road. But that's unfair because there are many other people who should have been given the same opportunities and they weren't given that opportunity.
But Mr. Moodaley, the person who was fast-tracked, are they white or black?
For the benefit of the argument, it's a white person.
Okay.
It's important that we should call things by their names, Mr. Moodaley. The terms of reference seek this inquiry to establish whether racial and or gender discrimination, which was unfair, impacted on the sporting code called cricket. So whilst I do appreciate, this is the the attitude of all non-racialists, this idea that, we should not define things in terms of race and color. But the reality is that then there comes a stage when a proper evaluation will be able to be done if we are able to see what the kind of animal is that we are dealing with. So I'm not one of those, and there will be those who think that from the position of an ombudsperson, I should not say so. But I'm not one of those people who necessarily think that the mere mention of the racial group of the kind of study that you are trying to analyze makes you guilty of looking at race as a criterion for your assessment. It is sometimes important that we call things by their names. For instance, if I may just digress, I never fail to make an example from my own profession, my day job, that in the judiciary, in the judges section of the law, in 1994, after we had voted the reality was that out of 168 judges, more or less, there were only 2 black judges, 3. It was Mohammed, Kumalo, and Madala. 3 out of a total of about 168 judges. And thanks for the Constitution that made a provision that, you know, when recommendations are made for judicial appointment, we should, I mean, those who sit in the JSC must consider, you know, the representativity of the judiciary in terms of race and gender. At least there was an injunction as far as the, you know, the judiciary is concerned. And you can imagine, in a population where the majority of people are other than white, for them to be administered justice by a majority white, you know, judiciary raised questions of concern. And the Constitution, or those who dealt, you know, with the compilation of the Constitution, at least put that as an imperative for transformation. There is no other provision in any legislation or in the Constitution for other, you know, institutions other than the judiciary. But I am sure that there would be those who would say, you know, why did the Constitution, you know, provide for that kind of guidance, that there should be representativity that would reflect, you know, the demography of the country in terms of race and gender. And yet now, when we look at the composition of the judiciary, one can see why this was so. But then that's in the judiciary, and I'm sure there are still a number of concerns from some quarters that people are appointed simply because they are female or simply because they are black. So what I'm saying is, please feel free to indicate to us, especially with the kind of mandate that we have from the terms of reference. We have noted your commitment to non-racialism, and it's a noble commitment, I have to say. But we will never get to the bottom of these issues if we somehow feel apologetic to call things as they are. So if we ask about the identity of the cricketers who apparently were being favored, please feel free and say, cricketer so-and-so, who is white, you know, was played ahead of cricketer so-and-so, who's not white, even though, you know, in terms of, you know, talent and efficiency, you would have expected cricketer so-and-so who's black to have been chosen, or to have been favored, or to have been preferred. So that's a long way of telling you something which you as a non-racialist appreciate. Yeah.
All right. Mr. Chairman, is it at all possible to share my screen or to put something on the screen?
Yes, no, it has been done before. Somebody before you did it.
Mr. Moodaley,
I've got something here.
Mr. Moodaley, before we go back there, go to your, what you want to share with us. Just on the backdrop of the Ombuds's comments, I just want to take up 2 issues with you, you know, in the list of what you regard as current matters that yet remain unresolved.
Yes.
Number 1, you mentioned that there's a dispute that arose in September of 2020 and it was referred to CSA, and till date it has not been resolved. Am I right?
Yes.
And I take it that that dispute arose within Eastern Province Cricket. Am I right?
That's correct, yes.
Are you able to share with us exactly what the nature of the dispute is?
Okay. Let me. You see, it's about procedures and processes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And an AGM was scheduled, okay, for a date in August. A few days before the meeting was to be held, we received notification that the meeting was going to be adjourned because the auditors weren't quite prepared with the financial statements. Fine, that's no problem. Then when the meeting eventually commenced, 2 weeks later, an old sickness in our cricket is that there was no quorum. And the people in charge wanted to proceed with the meeting because their argument was that the MOI makes provision for the fact that if a meeting is adjourned, you don't need a quorum to proceed. I put a stop to it because I said, but your meeting didn't take place in the first place. The first meeting was never convened. So they had to concede and say, fine, there was no meeting, so the meeting had to be adjourned. Now the reason for wanting to go ahead, because in our cricket, there's always been this thing that the provincial or your affiliate AGMs must be concluded before that of Cricket South Africa, which makes sense. But then the timing is never put into practice. So eventually, when that meeting took place, an item was going to be tabled at the reconvened AGM, which we again objected to because it wasn't on the original agenda, and the meeting had to be rescheduled for a later date in September. In fact, it was on the 19th of September or something thereabouts. And I specifically reminded them that all the people, even those who weren't part of the original meeting, should be given notification to participate in the meeting. Because there were also going to be elections to fill 2 vacancies on the EP board that had to take place on that day. But as things were, they only extended the invite to the people who were part of the original meeting. And when some clubs wanted to participate in the meeting, they were turned down. And they were specifically told that they were not part of that original meeting. Our objection as a club was that the person that we had appointed as a second delegate wasn't given the invite. And it was only about 30 minutes later that I could get that person to sign into the meeting. And when the elections were going to take place, that person wasn't allowed to participate in the meeting. And on the basis of those 2 issues, that other clubs weren't allowed to participate, even though they wanted to participate, and the fact that our delegate wasn't allowed to participate in the elections, we raised an objection, which we were legally entitled to. The first reaction from EP Cricket was that no, we had no case. They followed their MOI to the letter, and they felt we had no reason to be unhappy. Now, that gave us reason to then proceed, having tried to deal with the matter locally, then to CSA. And CSA, according to their MOI, was supposed to deal with the matter within 10 days, which never happened, and we had to keep reminding them to deal with the matter. Eventually, only sometime this year, did they then say their executive decision is that the matter must be dealt with by Eastern Province Cricket again. And to date, there's been no attempt to contact us to deal with it.
Okay, no, thanks for the explanation. The second issue I wanted to take up was you raised the issue of Eastern Province Cricket non-adherence to its MOI. In what way has it failed to adhere?
Okay. I'm going to take you back in time, Mr. Chairman. In 2015, the EP AGM was scheduled for, I think it's the 15th or the 16th of August. It was a Saturday anyway. Now, at that point in time, the MOI stipulated that delegates needed to be registered at least 48 hours before the meeting could proceed. In other words, by 10 o'clock on the Thursday preceding the meeting, all delegates should have been registered, and no registrations would have been tolerated thereafter. As it happened, the Chief Executive Officer at the time, Mr. Jesse Chellan, and I spoke on the Thursday after the 10 o'clock cutoff. Not over that matter, but he called me because we were having a club fundraising event Friday, and he just wanted to check how things were going. And I happened to ask him, and I asked him, how are your preparations going for Saturday morning? And he mentioned to me that they did not have the required number of registrations. So I said, well, in that case, you cannot proceed with your meeting. He then mentioned to me, no, he contacted the CEO of Cricket South Africa. At the time, it was Mr. Aaron Logart, and he told him he would come back to him with the solution. So I remember telling him very clearly, but listen, nobody in this land can tell you how to go ahead with your meeting. Your meeting cannot go ahead. Your MOI stipulates that the cutoff is 10 o'clock, 48 hours before the meeting, and that's where you are right now. But as it so happened, the meeting proceeded on the Saturday. Okay? And I made inquiries from people in the office after that as to how did it come about that the meeting proceeded. And then I was told that they had contacted clubs. Some of the people had contacted clubs to submit proxies for the meeting after the cutoff, and on that basis they could have a quorum to go ahead with the meeting. And you see, that's one instance. I will explain another instance. Currently, the EP Cricket MOI also stipulates that there shall be at least 3 meetings a year with the members, one of which is the AGM, and then 2 other general meetings must be held. Mr. Chairman, except for when they wanted to table an issue or convene a special meeting, no general meetings with the clubs have been called, and I'm under oath, and I will say it, for at least 6 or 7 years, according to that MOI. You see?
Are you saying no general meeting and no AGM too?
No. I'd say general meeting,
okay.
not the AGM.
Okay.
You see? I'm talking of the other 2 meetings that are supposed to be called with the members in terms of the MOI. Okay? And I'm saying except for when they want to raise an issue, but they don't abide by the MOI and call meetings. So you find that what has happened over years is that people have gotten into a habit of, well, if there are no meetings, then what must happen? And so for a number of years, even the AGM has never proceeded at the first attempt. It always proceeded at the second attempt when no official quorum was required. And you cannot run an organization on the basis of minimal contact with your stakeholders. There's no reason to fear your stakeholders. You're not always going to have a pleasant relationship with your stakeholders, but you need to consult with them on a regular basis. I'm going to give you another example. During this recent impasse at CSA, and I think I've mentioned it in my correspondence to this Ombudsman office, we did not receive any, or clubs, and I'm talking of the clubs here now, I can't speak for clubs in other provinces, no official information was ever sent to clubs about what was happening in cricket. The only information we got was through the media. And I mentioned that in some correspondence with your officers. But when they were told to get proper mandates, clubs were sent a notification on the Thursday before Good Friday for a meeting to take place on Easter Monday or Family Day at 4 p.m. Now, if your MOI says you must give 15 business days notice, and in terms of the definitions contained therein, business days are defined as weekdays, excluding public holidays, and then also obviously excluding weekends, right? So for that meeting that was scheduled for the Monday, there was technically no notice given because the Thursday cannot count because it also excludes the day of the notice and the day of the event. So the Friday was a public holiday, the Saturday was a weekend, the Sunday was a weekend, the Monday was a public holiday. So what do you think happened? There was no quorum. They then went ahead and tried to reschedule the meeting for 2 days later, again, which is irregular. See? And there was still no quorum. So I'm just pointing out, Mr. Chairman, when we talk of transformation, there's a lot more that needs to be transformed besides representation in teams. You see? Our entire cricket system needs to be reformed. That is the point I'm getting at. Then, are you happy there?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Moodaley. You answered me.
Okay. So can I go to sharing my screen with you? I'm watching my time.
Yes.
I've got
Yes.
2 minutes left. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, now, you see, way back, Mr. Chairman, when this other process was started in 1998 with the Monitoring Committee, we came up with this definition, right, of transformation. A process whereby an organization realigns itself with the changing social, political and economic environment and engages in a process of internal renewal in order to discharge its public mandate as efficiently and effectively as possible. And the reason why we adopted this definition, because for us this was an all-encompassing definition. We saw transformation in this broader sense then already. And of course, like I told you, it wasn't well received because this means that you must recognize that factors external to the organization are necessitating that drastic changes must occur internally and externally on many fronts if cricket is to achieve what it says it wants to achieve, right? And that for this to happen, you need radical change. And I stand by the point that there needs to be a revolution in our cricket. Now, please let me explain. I don't mean, when I say revolution, I don't mean a revolt. We don't want what we saw happening 2 weeks ago, but there must be a revolution. In other words, something drastic must happen in our cricket. So that is the first slide I want to share with you. I'm not sure if you have any questions before we go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. Then, what I want to point out also, Mr. Chairman, you see, cricket mustn't see itself, and I'm linking with this now, mustn't see itself as existing in isolation, right? And when I talk about problems being experienced and I talk of sport as a social movement, then I just want to highlight some of the problems, and I don't want to come across as lecturing to anybody, right? When we look at this slide, I'm sure you all can see it. It's titled Substance Abuse.
Yes.
Right. Now, these are proper stats, and I've quoted the source there, Parent 24, right? showing you how many people were admitted to rehabilitation centers in 2016. We had 8,787. The number increased to 10,000 and 17 in 2017. 60% of crimes that are committed in South Africa involve the use of substances, and 80% of male youth deaths are alcohol related. And you can see why people go crazy when the president wants to announce an alcohol ban. But yeah. Then, 1 in 5 adults abuse drugs and alcohol. Drug abuse costs us 20 billion per annum. Alcohol abuse, 37.9 billion per annum. And the rate of fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS, in South Africa is 5 times that in the USA. Now you must understand the comparison. Our population is 60 million and the USA's is 330 million. And yet our rate of FAS is 5 times. Yes, there are historical reasons for this, people being paid with liquor at the end of the week and all of those things, which we've only outlawed in our Basic Conditions of Employment Act recently. Okay. Then, in terms of teenage pregnancy, adolescents, that girls between the age of 10 to 19 account for 13.6% of registered births. We're not even taking unregistered births. And then the Department of Basic Education observed that 68,000 learners gave birth to at least one child in 2013 compared to 50,000 in 2019. And in 2006, one school had as many as 144 pregnant female learners. But now we all know a female cannot get pregnant on her own. That only happened once in the history of man when Jesus Christ was born. It has never happened again. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay. Yeah. Then, in terms of HIV and AIDS, right? This is 2017, well reported in 2018. There were 7.2 million people living with HIV. Now, we have the biggest epidemic in the world, and we don't have the biggest population. The prevalence among the adult population, that's in ages 18 to 49, was 18.8%. We had 270,000 new infections, and there were 110,000 AIDS-related deaths. Okay. 61% of the adults that have HIV and AIDS were receiving ARVs, while 50% of the children were receiving ARVs. The number of people receiving ARVs increased from 616,000 in 2016 to 2.7 million in 2017 and 3.7 million in 2018. Unemployment. Now we all know COVID-19 has had an effect, and this figure does incorporate that. At the first quarter of 2020, before COVID was reported, it was 30.1%. At the end of last year, it was reported, or earlier this year, 32.5%. But for sport, what is more significant is that persons in the age bracket 50 to 24, the unemployment rate is 63.2%, according to Stats SA. See, now, I'm highlighting these things, Mr. Chairman. You see, when you look back at the figure and say less than 10% of our kids are playing sport, in especially your black areas and your colored areas and your Indian areas and so forth, right? Now we can see why those problems are there. Because after school, what are those kids doing? They're falling prey to gangsterism. They're falling prey to substance abuse. The girls are falling prey to pregnancy because there's nothing for them to do. So that brings me to my point to say, what then is the role of sport in society? Sport has a much bigger role in society. It's not just there to make certain people rich and a handful of people famous, you see? And it is more than just physical. Okay? It helps us to build character. It teaches and develops strategic thinking, analytical thinking, leadership skills, goal setting and risk taking. That is what sport does in people, and those people that have been privileged to have had access to sport will attest to this. Besides falling prey to all those other vices that our kids are exposed to, right? And of course, I can go further and mention that sport is exercise or physical activity with fun. I'm not saying that everybody that plays sport in school is going to become a Springbok rugby player or a Protea women's or men's team member or something. We know only 11 people can be on that field at one time. But we need to expose more children to sport for more than just the sake of playing the sport. It's to deal with all those other problems. So sport has a lot to deal with, a big role to play in society, more than just providing for people an opportunity to become a top-class cricketer or rugby player or soccer player. I want to touch on another topic while we're on that point. A study was conducted by PwC in 2016. And according to their study, the total spending on sport was 15.285 billion rands. Okay? And that figure had grown at a compounded rate of 6.5% since 2011. Why am I saying that, Mr. Chairman? It is clear from that sport is big money. It's not the days when we were involved in sport where it was a Mickey Mouse thing. This is big money, right? And therefore, sport has a bigger role to play in society than what currently we think it has. Okay? First of all, sporting federations have a responsibility to conduct themselves in the same manner as other big corporates, and have to also agree to be scrutinized as any other business. And yet they have a lot more privileges because of the nature of their business. And they have an obligation to contribute to the national cause and to contribute in a positive manner towards the building of a society that represents the dreams and aspirations of all the people. Now, I've got a few points that I want to make to say, what do I mean when I say sport has a role to play? Some people are living with this incorrect perception that sport is designed to enrich a few, be they players, administrators, or paid officials, while totally ignoring the role and the important role that sport must play in society. Now, we must remember that South Africa is still a developing country. We may have some aspects of a first world economy and a first world infrastructure, but by and large, we are a developing country with a lot of third world conditions. And therefore, every effort must be made to contribute towards this national cause, right? And if we want to correct the past imbalances and inequities in South Africa, then every body, including sports federations, must contribute towards it. And this is what I want to get to. Sport must contribute towards the Skills Development Act. Somebody mentioned earlier on about administrators. And there are mechanisms at our disposal in sport with which we can equip people with skills so that they can become sports administrators that can do a job properly. As sports people, we should be actually embarrassed when the Minister of Sport reported or said to Parliament at the end of April that cricket has been brought to its knees by sports people. And he was referring to the the previous board of Cricket South Africa. So if we can develop people, if we can equip people with the right skill set, then we shouldn't have that kind of a problem. We also have an Employment Equity Act, Mr. Chairman, right? And I know for some people these are swear words, but it's there, right? Yet if you look at, and I'm just going to give you an example, if you look around the country in cricket, I think out of 14 affiliate chief executive officers, only 2 people are people of color. The rest are white people, right? So cricket is failing there. We then have a broad-based black economic empowerment strategy and codes, and surely sport must also contribute towards that development in that regard. And then, of course, we also have the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act of 2000, and sport must play a role there so that sport is seen to be doing the right thing and contributing to that national cause. So, if you ask me, what is it that cricket must do along this path, and what do I suggest should be done? Then cricket is going to have to reinvent itself. Now the problem is, if you ask the people who are currently in cricket to do it, it may not be done properly. I'm going to use another analogy for you. If we had to depend on the National Party to bring about democracy in this country, would we have the democracy that we have today? If you look at what they tried to do when they were in power, they came up with Bantustans and homelands and the tricameral parliament, nothing that the people wanted. So my question is, can we trust the people in cricket to bring about the change that is required? Because they've been given opportunities before and they failed hopelessly. So we need to think of other ways, Mr. Chairman, of doing it. We can't, I don't believe the people that are currently in cricket can be entrusted with the solely with the task of rebuilding cricket, reforming cricket. Okay? Cricket needs a complete overhaul. I'm going to read out for you what I think should be happening in cricket in order to get it right. We need a complete overhaul of all the structures in cricket, Mr. Chairman. We need to revise every process, every procedure, every system that's in cricket. Because obviously, if we look at why we are here today, those things haven't worked. So that is what I feel is required in cricket if it's going to be achieved. Okay. We need a mass capacity building program to ensure that administrators at all levels are properly skilled. We need to redirect resources to where they are most needed. And then cricket must play its role that it is claiming to play. It must act as a catalyst to bring about changes that is needed. Okay. It's 3:30.
Well, any question?
I reserve 15 minutes for you to ask me questions.
No, I think you have said everything that could possibly be said. Because I was going to ask, as I've always been asking, what you think should be done in order for this sporting code to come to the level of expectation. And I think you went ahead of me and responded. I can only thank you for the contribution you have made. it's not always that you get people who have a clear vision of what was sought to be achieved by those who committed to non-racial practices in sport, so that the sports that our country offers to its children in particular and to its people generally should be just that. There should be no artificial barriers of any sort, let alone barriers that are premised on prejudices such as race and gender. None of those should stand in the way of the enjoyment of sport in this country, because this country chose, even before 1994, and more so after 1994 and the adoption of the so-called final constitution of 1996, the country committed itself to equality, non-racialism, to non-sexism, and all those other markers of a progressive constitutional state. And it is true, the more one hears the stories that come before us, that cricket, when once it becomes a sporting code that one is addicted to, becomes a lifelong occupation, whether that occupation manifests itself as one continuing to play the sport, or as one continues to, graduate from playing the sport and becoming a selector, a coach, but it is a multifaceted sporting code, and multi-layered too, because people can participate in various places at various levels, and when it is a sporting code that offers so many opportunities, those opportunities should be available to all of South Africa's children, men and women alike, men and women of all races and creeds and persuasions. Your contribution has therefore assisted us to tackle this problem which has been put before us by Cricket South Africa to inquire into. And one would hope that we will take into, in fact, I can tell you now, we will take into account the contributions that we have made in shaping what our report is going to have to be, and in trying to also to persuade Cricket South Africa that the time is now past when there should be an inquiry after an inquiry after an inquiry without one seeing the fruits of those inquiries. I think a number of people have come here and say, what is it also going to achieve? But then they say, we hope this will be a different kind of probe if it is going to produce demonstrable and practical results, so that those who came before us should not feel that it was in vain that they did so. I can only hope that we will rise up to the level of that promise, and that those who have got powers in the entire universe of those who can make it happen, be it government, be it sporting officials, be it those who control the purse strings that makes things happen, May we hope that something worthy of the time and sacrifice that you have made in coming to give us your perspectives. One hopes that it will not be in vain that you did so. And for that reason, I again say to you, thank you very much for making yourself.
Mr. Chairman, remember I asked you before we go, I'd like to show you a few pictures. It will take a minute of your time. Do you mind?
No, not at all. In fact, we are still within time.
I still have 8 minutes.
Yeah.
I just want to show you. You know, we speak about facilities. I'm just going to put these pictures up. I've put the names of the facilities here just to show you. These are facilities that our people are expected to play sport on. Okay. That's what a cricket pitch at that facility looks like. Then that is a net at the field in Utrecht. I mean, people must practice. That's where the batsman must stand. You know what I'm saying? That is what the pitch looks like on that same facility. I mean, it doesn't even resemble a cricket pitch at all.
Sure.
For Dwezi, that is what the cricket pitch looks like, and I'm sure it's worse now with no work being done.
What Dwezi is in
clubhouse.
Grenada?
Yes, sir. Yeah. This is a clubhouse at KwaNobuhle. And Sipho mentioned this morning to you about vandalism, but I'm just pointing it out. Okay? That's a clubhouse. At the same field, those are what the nets look like. Everything else has been stolen, the netting and whatever. It's only the poles left, and that is what it looks like. And then the last one I want to show you is what the pitch looks like at that facility.
What would your reaction be if there was a retort by those who are in authority to say, what is the point of creating these facilities? We put them up there, and before we can, turn our backs on them, they have been looted and vandalized because the communities do not look after them. There's so much that we as government can do. What would your considered opinion be? Because I can imagine that is maybe one of the responses that we may get from those who are in authority, whether it's roads and public works or education relevant to schooling facilities, or even the Ministry of Sport.
Mr. Chairman, we've gotten that before, right? I mean, there are other facilities that are even in a worse off state that was mentioned here before, multi-million rand projects that have been stripped bare. But it's because of those problems that I mentioned earlier, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all of those things. And yes, those are socio-economical and societal problems, right? That we all have to face with. But to answer your question, I think we need a bit of radical thinking. We need to start thinking outside of the box, and maybe we need to say, look, the idea of putting a facility in an isolated place, where you have one caretaker staying in a cottage to look after it doesn't work anymore. I mean, the facility that was mentioned to you earlier by Mr. Nondlwana, he spoke about Furnace Street. I mean, they had the caretaker under siege. They told him to his face, look, you stay there in your cottage. You don't interfere with us, because his cottage is in one corner of the field, and the fancy clubhouse that was built prior to the 2010 World Cup is a distance away. So, I mean, in the middle of the night when it's pitch dark, he can't go and investigate even if he hears a noise. I mean, he'll be murdered. So we need a bit of radical thinking to say, how do we then give our people proper facilities, but taking into account that we're not going to change the mindset of vandalism and drug addiction and substance abuse overnight. But we can't deprive our people of facilities. While that may take many years to change that mindset and to correct those things. So we need to maybe look at other models that are being used elsewhere, where facilities are. I'm just giving you an example. In the middle of Mumbai, or there is one particular area, for instance, and they call them Maidans, M-A-I-D-A-N-S, a ground which has got about 14 cricket pitches on it. And you can have 14 cricket matches happening there all at the same time. Now, I'm not saying we must go to that extent, but we could build things that have maybe got 3 or 4 fields in one complex, where you can then concentrate your efforts and have proper types of security and those things. I also don't think that we can afford to put a cricket field with a cricket pitch in every school, because we all know a cricket pitch needs a lot of maintenance. No use to do it, and like I told you, one of the things I believe in is sustainable development. No use putting your facility today and tomorrow you can't look after it. So we need to start looking at those, at radical ideas to provide our people with facilities, but not look at excuses for not providing them with the facilities.
Brilliant.
And that is why I say it needs to be the catalyst and bring people together around the table so we can talk about these things and come up with ideas of how to deal with the problems we face and how to provide people with the means.
And on that very optimistic yet practicable approach, we can adjourn now. And thank you very much. We're adjourned.